You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the first season finale of Enterprise called Shockwave. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on X, where we're at SQPN, and be sure to leave us comments in social media. We love to hear from you. I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Doctor Who, which you can find with Jimmy and I at wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Doctor Who. But today we are discussing this first of a multi-part story from Enterprise, the season finale. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in this episode?
This week, Captain Archer and the gang are taking a shuttle pod down to an alien colony world when the atmosphere suddenly catches fire and the colony is destroyed. Enterprise is blamed for this, and Starfleet cancels the Enterprise's mission. Under pressure from the Vulcans, they probably won't have another deep space mission for 10 or 20 years. But the time traveling crewman Daniels informs Captain Archer that this was a gambit in the temporal Cold War and Enterprise was not to blame for the colony's destruction. Using information from him, Archer is able to retrieve proof that the Suliban were responsible by taking data disks from a cloaked Suliban ship. They're on their way to deliver this as proof when the Suliban Silic is ordered by Future Guy to retrieve Archer. A swarm of Suliban ships surround Enterprise and demand he surrender himself or the ship will be destroyed. Archer goes to surrender himself but vanishes, and the Suliban target the Enterprise's warp core. Archer finds himself in a destroyed 31st century where crewman Daniels informs him that he was told to bring him here because the timeline wouldn't be safe if he went with Silic. But the timeline has unexpectedly shifted again, and all of his faction's portals have been destroyed, so there is no way to send Archer back. The end.
So I usually ask you first your overall impression, but I just, if I can for this time, just mention...
Assert yourself.
I am going to assert my privilege here and say that I was telling you before, I don't really remember this episode. I don't remember much of the first season of Enterprise. I don't know whether it's because I missed it the first time or it just didn't make as much of an impression on me and I haven't seen it since. But I really like this episode. It might have been the best of the first season, frankly, up to this point, or this point is the end of the season. So that's my overall impression. But let me get yours. What's your impression of this one?
I thought it was a good episode. They didn't really have a plan. They had ideas about how they were going to end the first season, and they didn't really settle on this. But I think it worked well. There's some stuff like this colony we never even see. That's kind of, it could be more impactful if you'd set it up, previously. Also, I think they could do a clearer job than they do introducing what the problem is, so they're flying down to this colony it's not a human colony. It's from a race called the Paragons, and we never meet any of them. And frankly, we should. They should have, instead of having this be a one-parter, they should have introduced the Paragons last episode or something so we'd have some sense of this colony and how it works. And then they could come down and blow it up in this episode, and it would be a lot more impactful. But what they're doing is there's some magic substance in the atmosphere that's apparently a byproduct of a mine that they're operating on this planet. And if tetrazine is what they call it, and which frankly sounds like an antibiotic that you take to get rid of your poison ivy. But if you fly too close to it, then in plasma, it will catch fire. And so they have these protocols of when you're bringing the shuttle pod down, you got to close your plasma ducts 50 kilometers away. And Malcolm, who's flying this shuttle pod, closes them 75 miles away just to be extra safe. And yet there's a plasma detonation of the tetrazine that wipes out the colony. So all that, and it kills 3,600 colonists, we're told. Well, they could have done a better job explaining that. They eventually get all the pieces out, but it goes by way too fast when it's actually happening. And I'm like, why are you flying down to this planet if it's so dangerous? You know,
Right.
they didn't. So why does this planet have a flammable atmosphere? You know,
Seems like a bad place to build a colony.
exactly. Yeah. They eventually explained that tetrazine is in the atmosphere because it's a byproduct of a mining operation, but that isn't made clear, or it wasn't clear to me in the opening sequence. So,
And it's only in this one layer in the atmosphere, like above and below it, you're safe, but it's the traveling through it. But again, you don't get that till later.
Yeah. So that I wasn't particularly pleased with. But after that, the episode gets much better. Archer contacts Admiral Forrest, who for once we have a Starfleet admiral who's not a bad guy. You know,
Yes.
he's got
very sympathetic.
Very sympathetic. He's got Archer's back. And he has to deliver the bad news, which we don't learn from him, but it came through him, which is that Enterprise's mission has been canceled. That destroying a colony is not really what Starfleet was up for, and with arguments from the Vulcans that it's still too premature, humans haven't learned enough, reel it back in. And Bakula does a good job of acting grieved and guilty, and when Trip is like objecting, as you would expect, he's like dismissed.
Can I unpack some of that? Because I want to dig a little into some of the things you've mentioned. The first thing about the colony being destroyed, I think the context of when this episode came out is important because it came out in May 2002. I think a lot of this story is intentionally evocative of 9/11. 3,600 people on the colony died. That is very close to the number of people who died in 9/11, if not right on the money, or at least close. And the destruction of Earth that we see in the final scene, the final image of the destroyed buildings, that is clearly evocative of the remains of the World Trade Center site. Again, that would have been in the audience, that would have been very present in their mind. So I like the fact that they're delving into this, the psyche of the audience at the time, and making it present for them. And this guilt, like you said, Bakula does a great job here. This guilt of being responsible for the deaths of 3,600 people by accident. You're responsible even if you're not culpable. And the weight of that, the grief over the cancellation of his lifelong dream to be the captain of this starship, and all of those things, and was really well done.
And it's not just his guilt over himself; it's everyone in Starfleet. He is now, their jobs are being reevaluated because of this. And they're not going to have the chance for 10 or 20 years. That's a good chunk of your career gone.
Yes. Right. And I like the fact that they recall the ship, because that's exactly what would happen if something bad happened today to a U.S. Navy warship overseas. It would be recalled and brought back to port.
As opposed to, just go on to the next place. No.
No, we would do that. So it felt very real and true to human nature, and I was glad with that.
And they have the Enterprise assigned to go meet a Vulcan ship to pick up T'Pol and Phlox and get them off the ship, and so they go to do that, and it's while they're doing that that T'Pol comes to Archer and tells him, without saying it exactly this way, that he's feeling sorry for himself, which is when he makes the point, it's not just for myself, it's for all the people in Starfleet who are gonna get crushed by this. But then she tells him, look, I'm prepared to challenge my government. You need to be prepared to challenge yours.
And we do get this interesting perspective from the two aliens who are trying to, who are perceiving what these humans are going through. And by doing that, the writers allow us to examine ourselves. But to Paul, she doesn't get it. Obviously, she doesn't get the captain's reaction. It was an accident. I mean, it's not logical to blame himself. He couldn't be responsible for this. And Phlox says it would be unnatural if the captain, even knowing he could not have done anything different, if he still didn't feel bad about it in this way. And I liked that we we get that from those two characters discussing it, because that way the audience can think about it. So I really like that.
Yeah. Then Archer goes to bed and wakes up 10 months ago on Earth.
Yes.
And he
That's
gets
a neat trick.
It is. He gets a call from Trip about a phone call he remembers, which is how he knows it's 10 months ago. And then Crewman Daniels shows up. And previously, Crewman Daniels has been seen to die. And somehow, because of time travel, he's alive again. And he's prepared to explain to Archer what's going on. And then we cut. And we get an entirely new perspective where Archer's back on Enterprise and he's having meetings with the crew and he's telling them stuff. And he says, in essence, we're not responsible. It was the Suliban, and we're going to go get proof. There are some data disks on this cloaked Suliban vessel, on this cloaked Suliban outpost on this moon. And I've got plans for how to build these beacons with futuristic technology that we haven't invented yet. And he eventually reveals it's because of Crewman Daniels, and they access Crewman Daniels' database that he left in his quarters because he died unexpectedly to pull this one thing out of it. And I promise it's the plans for the battle cruiser. And Malcolm is like, "Oh, look at all these Klingon cruisers. We're getting this one thing out of here. I promised him, Malcolm." And we shift into an entirely different mode of storytelling, which is something I noticed on Mission Impossible. A while back, I was doing a rewatch of the original Mission Impossible TV series from the late 60s. And what they do in that is they give you the essence of the mission. What we've got to do is this, but they don't give you the plan. And so what happens is you watch the plan unfold in front of you on Mission Impossible. You don't know what they're going to do next. It's not like they have a rehearsal scene where they go through, here are all the steps in the plan. If they ever do that, now there's when you're executing a caper, which is essentially what this type of storytelling is, you either tell the audience what the plan is, in which case it's got to go awry. Something has to happen, and then the
Ocean's
fun,
11.
which is Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
Something goes wrong, and you have to watch how the characters cope with the plan going awry. Or you don't tell the audience the plan, in which case they get to learn about the plan by watching it, in which case it doesn't have to go awry. And so here we shift into Mission Impossible storytelling, where we don't know what the plan is, but we're watching the pieces of it come together. There's a lot more show and a lot less tell. I noticed on rewatching Mission Impossible, minutes could go by where we're watching the characters do stuff and they're not explaining it to us because they, as the characters, know what they're supposed to do. And we have to figure out what they're doing by watching them. And I really like that mode of storytelling. And we get a taste of that here as we see Crewman Daniels' plan unfold in front of us, not knowing what it is.
So and again, I want to unpack what you said because there's a couple things I want to go back on. I like the line from Archer where he says, "This must be the first time a Vulcan has ever tried to cheer up a human." That was fun. And I really like that neat trick where Archer is going to bed, says goodnight to Porthos, turns off the light, says, "Come on, Porthos, up on the bed," and turns the light back on when Porthos doesn't come, and he's in his apartment back on Earth. Like this seamless time travel of some sort where he's the Archer of 10 months ago, but he's also the Archer of the future. So it's a different kind of time travel. Jimmy, I need to point out something that you don't know yet because you haven't watched the 5th season of Discovery, which is that...
Crewman Daniels comes back. Yeah, I know that.
Daniels is Kovich in the 5th season. So it really opens up, obviously not 20 years ago when they made this, but it really kind of opens up how you think about Daniels and Kovich when he comes up in the future. And we may see Kovich / Daniels in Strange New Worlds or something. That's entirely possible, I guess. So I really like that. He does say Scylla killed him in a manner of speaking, which is a very Star Wars thing to say.
Very wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Yes. And so, and I
or
do like,
or as the Borg Queen said, something like, "Your thinking is so linear."
Right. And I do like what you mentioned is that change in Archer. Like he's no longer, self-pitying. He's no longer down. He's energized. He's got a plan. He knows he's innocent, and he's got a thing to do. Knowing now, here's another thing we know, having watched the whole thing as opposed to at the time, knowing that Reed will turn out to be a Section 31 later on. His interest in the tech in Daniel's quarters has a different resonance in retrospect. So I thought that was interesting. If you watch carefully, you see more than just Klingon stuff. You actually see like the Defiant comes up and a couple other TNG DS9 era ships are in there as well. So that was pretty fun.
There's also a nice line in here where Malcolm and Archer are talking about something, and Malcolm is like, well, why didn't this happen? And Archer says, it's like those old Bible movies, Malcolm. It wasn't written. And okay, that's specifically a reference to the 10 Commandments.
Right.
Because where you've got Yul Brynner as Pharaoh, so let it be written, so let it be done.
Yes. That was really, I like that. That was really good. Okay, so one quibble. Inside the story, it doesn't make sense. As a story writer, this is the way it has to be. You have a boarding action of an enemy vessel. You don't send the captain, first officer, and chief engineer.
That was ridiculous. It's like, okay, oh, man.
Nothing happened there that couldn't have been done by Reed and the other security guides.
Yeah.
And that's what should have happened. It just was silly otherwise. Because it's super risky. You're risking your captain and first officer and chief engineer?
Yeah, it's like, who are you leaving in charge?
Reed, who should be over there on board. Yeah. That was weird. I did like, though, that the boarding action. It was good action sequence, suitably dramatic. It made sense in the context. The cloak decloaker that they were given the plans for, and then they get this evidence that they need to prove their innocence. Although I wonder. You look back today, it's like, deep fake. I mean, what could this evidence possibly be that would be so convincing, especially given that it involves time travel stuff? I just have a hard time with that.
Yeah, although there are ways of, provenancing media so that it's like this is one-time recordable, cannot be altered afterwards. So you have an unbroken chain of provenance with the media. So there are ways to combat deep fakes.
Yeah.
They're not popularly known yet, but in principle, it's possible to do that.
So, and then we see, after they've gotten their evidence back, Silic with the unknown humanoid time traveler figure.
Who literally was just called Future Guy in the scripts, if I recall correctly.
Right. Apparently the showrunners were planning to reveal the identity of Future Guy
at some point.
Well, in the conclusion of the cliffhanger, and then in that interseason period, change their mind. And so I don't think did I miss this? Did I ever forget this? Did we ever? I don't think it ever got revealed.
We never found out who Future Guy was. There was some talk of making him a future version of Archer, which would have been really interesting.
Yeah.
But if I recall correctly, but we never learned who Future Guy is my memory.
I mean, he's the actor James Horan has a real his delivery comes across to me as either Romulan or Cardassian. Just this I don't know. It just the way it comes across. But in any case, it would have been nice to get some conclusions on that one.
We also have some discussion in this of how the Romulan Science Council has determined that time travel is impossible.
The Vulcan, yeah.
I'm sorry, the Vulcan, the Vulcan Science Council. And it's like, okay, I would really love to know how that works, because if faster than light travel happens, then time travel happens.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe with Alcubierre warp drives, it doesn't, but that's kind of a trope if you're aware of much about Einsteinian physics, you become aware that superluminal travel entails the existence of time travel, and they just ignore that on this show.
Right, they do. But Archer isn't.
I do like it though that
Yep.
we the viewer know the Vulcans are wrong about this, because we've all seen Search for Whales among other
Yes.
things.
It is interesting to me how intent Archer is on getting to Paul to believe him that he traveled through time, even though there's no other explanation for how he knew what he knew. Like he needed her to believe him for whatever reason, even though she was going along with the plan.
Or at
But
least it's partly because he's leaving her in charge. You know, he's going to leave her in charge. He needs her to be open to the true explanation. And so he doesn't end up arguing, you need to believe me, but you need to be open to time travel as an explanation.
Later on, yes.
Yeah.
But even in the early discussion, he really wants her to believe him. But and that was an interesting aspect of this is, Silik shows up, they surround the Enterprise, give yourself up. And Archer's gonna do it. He solemnly places T'Pol in command before preparing to give himself up. You could tell he thinks he's not coming back.
Yeah, and when Trip starts to object, he cuts him off, and it's like, you do your best to help her. She is in charge. Everyone else do the same. Take care of my dog, and don't. He tells Hoshi, and don't give him any cheese.
Right. That's the most important command. Right. Don't give dogs cheese. It's really bad.
Well, I was actually at a dog park because I was dog sitting my sister's dog Luna this last week, and I was at a dog park Saturday morning and letting Luna have a romp around with other dogs, and there was this guy there who had a couple of beagles, and I actually had just watched this episode of Enterprise. So I said, do you ever give your dogs cheese? And he's like, oh yeah, if I'm in the kitchen and I'm, making something with cheese, he said, I think of it as the cheese tax. And I said, did that ever cause you any problems? And he said, nope.
That's funny.
Okay, well, I just wondered because they make a big deal of it. I explained about Captain Archer and stuff like that, and he has a beagle, and he says cheese blocks it up, and it's like, no, it doesn't happen with my dogs.
Maybe it's just Porthos in particular.
Yeah.
So, and then he walks out of the turbolift, and he's in this, which I think was his apartment building that we'd seen earlier in the episode, but now destroyed.
And it's now also the 31st century.
That is a long-lasting building. If
it was the same one, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because he sees Daniels there, and Daniels is just as devastated as he is. And, well, what do we do? I don't know. Like, Daniels is the man with all the plans, and to have him being just as lost as Archer, because this happened. This building was destroyed. All of this
ago.
Yeah,
but
right.
But it's clear the timeline is shifted because this has been destroyed for a lot longer than 10 minutes.
Exactly. There's no way to send you back, and so obviously there will be because the show. But and then to be continued. And this is, by the way, the first Star Trek series to end its first season on a cliffhanger. No other Star Trek series has done that. So that's an interesting little tidbit. Anything else to say about this one, Jimmy?
No, I enjoyed this one. I think they could have set it up better if they'd set the previous episode on the Paraga colony world. So we got to know it and meet these people and learn about their government and how important this contact is. And then at the beginning of this episode, they're just going down for another visit and bam, that would have been much more effective. But setting that aside, I really like this episode. Unfortunately, my memory of how they pay this off next season is not great. But
yeah,
we'll see.
A few cliches. All right. So that's it for us this time. Before we go, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek, including Justin C., Perla A., Ron S., Michael K., and Josh P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So, what did you think of Shockwave, this first part of the season finale? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord, or leave a comment on our YouTube channel where you can watch The Secrets of Star Trek at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. Make sure to like, follow, comment, and all those things. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the original series episode, Devil in the Dark. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Live long and prosper, and no kill I.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, the Vulcan Science Directorate has concluded that time travel is impossible.